Every year, a handful of indie games slip under everyone's radar. Not because they're bad, but because they're overshadowed by bigger releases, messy marketing, or genres people assume they've already seen enough of. But indie's already proven one thing. They're carrying the most creativity in gaming right now. Strange worlds, bold mechanics, experimental art styles, and stories that feel personal. These aren't just small games. They're the kind of experiences that remind you why indie devs matter. These are indie hidden gems of the second half of 2025. If you end up liking the content, please subscribe for more, and I'd appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up and tell me what you think down below. Love to hear it. Ovis Loop is one of those indies that immediately hooks you with its premise before you even understand the mechanics. It's not the surreal, narrative-focused indie game you might expect from its pixel cyberpunk aesthetic, but a high-octane action roguelite that feels like a fever dream collision between Dead Cells and Slay the Spire. You play as Omega, a sheep armed with massive weaponry, greatswords, guns, and electric rapiers, fighting against a legion of robotic wolves in a post-apocalyptic retelling of the classic fable. The core loop revolves around frantic, wave-based combat and deep build customization. Instead of just finding loot, you slot skills into an intricate upgrade system where active abilities can be chained with passive buffs, allowing for wild synergies like summoning drone swarms or triggering lightning strikes on every hit. The visuals are striking, detailed pixel art enhanced by dynamic glitch effects that bend and break the screen, reinforcing the simulation gone wrong vibe. It demands quick reflexes and strategic planning, rewarding players who can master its rhythm of dodging and punishing aggression. But Ovis Loop isn't easy to recommend universally. The difficulty curve is punishing right out of the gate, with bosses that feel like steep walls for newcomers. Some sprite work, while stylish, can be hard to read in the chaos of battle, leading to cheap hits. However, if you crave a roguelite that trades generic fantasy for a stylish, glitch-hop action spectacle where a sheep creates absolute carnage, this is a hidden gem that refuses to play it safe. Eriksholm, the Stolen Dream, brings a rare kind of handcrafted detail to stealth adventure games. The kind that instantly grabs you with its illustrated storybook style and early 1900s industrial atmosphere. Buildings lean over cobblestone streets like old giants. Factory smokestacks cut the skyline, and every character moves with expressive animations that feel somewhere between stop motion and a theatrical performance. The world looks grounded but magical, grimy but inviting, like a folktale happening in a city that's just beginning to modernize. That unique aesthetic makes every alley and staircase a place worth exploring, even when danger lurks around every corner. The stealth itself leans heavily on timing, distraction tools, and environmental awareness. Guards have clearer patterns than most modern stealth games, turning each encounter into a puzzle rather than a trial-and-error loop. And the narrative lands surprisingly hard. This isn't a flashy AAA drama, but a personal story about family, class oppression, and the lengths people go when the world closes its doors. It feels intimate in the best way. But Eriksholm isn't perfect. The animations, while beautiful, can sometimes feel slower than the gameplay wants, making tight escapes more frustrating than tense. Pathfinding for enemies occasionally wobbles, and some players felt the difficulty curve spikes unexpectedly in the mid-game. There's also a certain indie stiffness in interactions, objects that don't quite collide right, or AI that forgets what it saw a little too quickly. Yet the game's identity is unmistakably strong. It's stylish without being derivative, emotional without being melodramatic, and mechanically clever without sacrificing atmosphere. Eriksholm is the kind of indie gem people rediscover years later and wonder how they missed it, a quiet standout for this year that deserves far more attention. Easy Delivery Co. looks like a cozy parcel delivery sim on the surface, but underneath the cute exterior is one of the most unexpectedly addicting physics-driven games of 2025. Its art style leans into the PS1 style with a retro aesthetic and vibe, giving every town and environment this charming handmade feel. like a toy set come to life. Buildings wobble slightly when bumped, vehicles bounce as if filled with springs, and characters animate with exaggerated, almost slapstick energy. That visual softness disguises a layer of mechanical depth that only reveals itself once the deliveries start getting complicated. The fun comes from how the game treats physics as both the challenge and the joke. Packages slide, swing, tumble, and ricochet off objects with delightful unpredictability. Roads tilt unexpectedly, bridges sway, and windy areas can send fragile parcels cartwheeling into rivers if you're careless. Managing momentum becomes an art form. Every slope, turn, and bump calls for improvisation. The game's sense of humor shines through environmental storytelling, quirky townsfolk, bizarre package requests, and delivery routes that look straightforward until something ridiculous happens. But easy delivery isn't flawless. The physics, while charming, can sometimes become chaotic in ways that don't feel entirely fair. Controls occasionally struggle to keep up with the game's more complex setups, especially when vehicles start stacking upgrade effects. Some players report camera frustration in tight areas where objects obscure what's coming next. And while the progression system is fun, more variety in late-game delivery would have kept things fresh. Still, its charm is irresistible. Few games capture the joy of simple tasks going horribly and hilariously wrong quite like this one. It's playful, imaginative, and consistently surprising. It's an indie gems that sneaks up on you with far more personality than you expect from a laid-back delivery game. Scrabdackle is pure creative chaos in the best way possible. A hand-drawn, whimsical action-adventure that looks like it was sketched in the margins of a middle school notebook, then magically brought to life. The visual style is messy, expressive, and full of personality. Characters wobble as they move, enemies bounce around with goofy hostility, and environments shift between childlike silliness and surprisingly clever design. It's playful, imaginative, and instantly memorable. Gameplay combines exploration, spell slinging, and light RPG progression. The combat is snappy and fast, letting you mix spells, mobility tricks, and goofy improvised tactics that feel satisfying without being overly complex. Every area has its own charm. Talking fruit, haunted doodles, living geometry puzzles, and the writing strikes a balance between absurd comedy and genuine warmth. What makes it shine is how alive it feels. Characters react to your choices, environments respond to your spells, and the world constantly surprises you with clever interactions. However, its playful approach introduces a handful of rough edges. The looseness of the hand-drawn animation sometimes makes depth and distance harder to read in tight combat encounters. Some bosses lean heavily on chaos over clarity, which can feel unfair rather than challenging. The game's humor, while delightful for many, may feel too silly or minimalist for players expecting deeper narrative stakes. And though progression is fun, a few systems remain lightly developed compared to more traditional RPGs. Still, Scrabdackle succeeds because it embraces pure creativity with zero hesitation. It's charming, surprising, and packed with personality, a reminder that indie games don't need massive scope to be memorable. It's not trying to mimic anything else. It stands proudly as its own strange, joyful world. And in a landscape full of dark, serious titles, this playful energy feels like a breath of fresh, doodled air. Silly Polly Beast is chaos wrapped in a deceptively rough art style, but don't let the silly name fool you. This is a brutal survival horror shooter with a punk rock soul. It doesn't play like a physics sandbox. It plays like Resident Evil or Silent Hill dropped into a red and black sketchbook nightmare. Actually, this is very reminiscent of Parasite Eve. You play as Polly, fighting for freedom with a diverse arsenal that includes a skateboard for melee attacks and scarce ammunition for your guns. The game thrives on tension and style. The fixed camera angles and limited resources force you to make desperate decisions in combat. while the narrative shifts perspectives and genres to reflect Polly's unstable mental state. It's gritty, loud, and visually stunning in a way that feels like an angry comic book come alive. The skateboard isn't just a gimmick. It's your lifeline when ammo runs dry, letting you bash demons in a way that feels uniquely aggressive for a horror game. But the same aggression that makes it fun also makes it frustrating. The difficulty is steep, with punishing checkpoints and bosses that demand near perfection. Some players might find the resource scarcity maddening rather than frightening, and the rough aesthetic extends to some clunky collision moments. Even so, Silly Polly B stands out because it has an undeniable identity. It's raw, unapologetic, and overflowing with personality. A true hidden gem for horror fans tired of the same old polished scares. Mop Punk is one of the strangest, most visually striking indies of 2025, and it deserves more attention. Instead of neon skylines and chrome, it imagines a world where biotech and fungi have fused into something organic and unsettling. Bioluminescent spores drift like dust, architecture pulses with vein-like patterns, and machinery looks grown rather than built. Walking its zones feels like exploring a living organism that reacts to you, with environments that shift and breathe as you move through them. Crucially, it's an online co-op game. You and your friends explore shifting areas, tackle shared objectives, and combine tools to manipulate living tech and fungal ecosystems. Much of the game's value comes from those emergent moments, unexpected events, group improvisation, and the small stories that form when players experiment together. Mechanically, the loop centers on co-op exploration and resource sharing, scavenging biotech scraps, spore-like clusters, and living components as a group to craft and evolve gear that behaves more symbiotically than mechanical. Combat and gadgets are intentionally unpredictable. Weapons can mutate or behave differently depending on the environment and the session, so coordination and improvisation often matter more than pure twitch skill. That unpredictability can make encounters feel tense and memorable, especially when a team figures out a clever combo or adapts on the fly. There are trade-offs. The systems can feel opaque at first. The UI leans intentionally organic and takes time to learn, and performance can dip in dense areas where particle effects and dynamic systems pile up. If you want a tight, solo narrative or a fast-paced shooter, this isn't the game for you. But if you enjoy cooperative discovery, creative problem-solving, and a world that feels alive and strange, Mop Punk's bold, fungal aesthetic and co-op first design make it a standout hidden gem from the second half of 2025. The Wandering Village continues to stand out because it does what most city builders never dare to try. It puts your entire civilization on the back of a colossal, wandering creature. The world isn't just a backdrop. It's alive, moving, breathing, and occasionally ignoring your desperate attempts to keep your people alive. The art direction blends soft, painterly landscapes with a strange, almost serene post-apocalyptic tone, where poisonous spores drift in the air and lush forests return between dangerous biomes. As Onbu stomps across the world, the scenery shifts beneath your feet. Deserts, ruins, toxic valleys, creating a constant visual and mechanical rhythm that feels unlike anything in the genre. But the real charm comes from how your choices affect the creature itself. You can build into its skin or respect its space, feed it or exploit it, listen to its needs, or ignore them in a scramble for short-term survival. That relationship gives the game an emotional core missing from most management sims. It's not without issues. The pace can slow to a crawl during long travel segments, and advanced players sometimes feel the systems could be deeper. Early versions occasionally struggle with balance, making certain runs feel overly punishing or strangely easy depending on biome roles. Still, The Wandering Village is one of those indie games where the concept alone is enough to hook you, and the execution lands far more often than it misses. It's cozy, stressful, beautiful, and melancholy all at once. If you want a management game that feels personal, even spiritual at times, This remains one of the most distinctive hidden gems of 2025. Effulgence is easily one of the most visually distinct indies of the year, a party-based RPG rendered entirely in ASCII art. It's not a real-time adventure with light beams. It's a turn-based tactical game where the world, the characters, and the monsters are all built from cascading letters and symbols. The result is a sci-fi world that looks like it's bleeding out a 1980s terminal, glowing with a retro-futuristic effulgence. The core mechanic is incredibly unique. Enemies are resources. When you defeat aliens and monsters, you don't just get XP. You break them down into their atomic raw parts and feed them into a 3D printer to craft new weapons and gear mid-run. It creates a satisfying loop of destruction and creation. You navigate a 3D world map, manage a squad, and engage in battles where you have to balance your ammo and durability against the resources you'll gain from the kill. But its beauty comes with caveats. The text-heavy visuals can be hard to parse during chaotic moments, leading to symbol soup, where it's tough to tell a wall from an enemy. It's also a shorter experience designed for replayability rather than a 50-hour epic, which might leave some RPG fans wanting more depth. However, Effulgence stands tall because it commits 100% to its aesthetic. It's the kind of indie that defines itself through a singular, bold vision, delivering a tactical experience that feels genuinely alien. Constance is a somewhat emotionally haunting and deeply creative Metroidvania that blends fluid 2D platforming with emotional storytelling. It's an action platformer where you wield a giant paintbrush to fight enemies and traverse a decaying inner world representing the protagonist's mental health and burnout. The art style is vibrant and hand-drawn, shifting palettes to match the mood of each biome, from gloomy cyberpunk cities to floating, dreamlike islands. The gameplay revolves around paint-based mobility and combat. You use your brush to dash, attack, and interact with the environment, unlocking new techniques that open up previously inaccessible areas. Classic genre stuff, but executed with a buttery smooth feel similar to Hollow Knight or Celeste. The game balances intense boss fights with introspective narrative moments, using playable flashbacks to explore Constance's past as a violinist and her struggles with perfectionism. But the emotional ambition occasionally hampers the pacing. Some critics felt the narrative metaphors were a bit heavy-handed or unresolved, and while the gameplay is tight, it doesn't drastically reinvent the genre wheel. It's a comfort food, Metroidvania, polished and beautiful, but familiar. Even with those caveats, Constance shines as a standout indie gem. It's imaginative, visually captivating, and built with a level of polish that makes moving through its world a joy. Jotunnslayer. Hordes of Hel brings heavy metal Nordic chaos to the indie arena, delivering a fast-paced action experience wrapped in a bold, comic-inspired art style. Instead of leaning on realism, it embraces thick outlines with sharp contrasts and dramatic color splashes that make every frame look like a panel torn from a Viking graphic novel. Enemies explode into streaks of glowing runes, spell effects crackle with fiery intensity, and the environments, icy fjords, cursed forests, volcanic battlegrounds, feel like mythic battlegrounds painted with modern energy. Combat is where the game goes all in on style. Every swing of your weapon leaves stylized trails, and combos transition smoothly into finishing moves that feel equal parts brutal and theatrical. It's a power fantasy driven by speed, rhythm, and spectacle. The soundtrack pulses with thunderous drums and distorted guitars, pushing the pace forward as you carve through hordes. Bosses tower over you with outlandish designs, giants with glowing runic scars, demigods wreathed in flame, each one a visual feast. But that intensity can also overwhelm. The screen often fills with so many particle effects that clarity suffers, especially during late-game waves where enemies stack aggressively. Difficulty spikes appear suddenly, sometimes forcing players into grinding for materials to upgrade gear. The narrative, while intriguing, is delivered in quick, stylized vignettes that may leave lore-focused players wanting more depth. And performance dips have been noted during especially crowded encounters, though patches have steadily improved stability. Despite these flaws, Jotunnslayer stands out because it commits completely to its identity. It's loud, bold, and unapologetically over the top in the best way. The kind of game that feels like a myth retold through the lens of a heavy metal album cover. Indie action titles rarely look this confident, and even rarer still manage to back that style with genuinely fun gameplay. It earns its hidden gem status by being one thing above all, visually unforgettable. Pale Coins is one of those quiet, atmospheric indies that sneaks up on you. It's a handcrafted open-world action RPG that blends the top-down perspective of classic Zelda with the punishing weight of a Souls-like. The game leans into a moody, old-school fantasy aesthetic with what I would call restrained pixel art. The sharp black outlines and muted colors that make every dungeon and forest feel ancient and dangerous. The gameplay blends methodical exploration with deliberate combat. You aren't just mashing buttons. You're managing stamina, reading enemy patterns, and positioning yourself to avoid being overwhelmed by swarms of insects or charging ogres. It proudly adopts a no-hand-holding philosophy, dropping you into the kingdom of Grenmark with little direction other than to find the fabled champion's coins. The progression is driven by loot and a fairly substantial equipment system where armor and weapons drastically change your playstyle, from heavy melee crushing to mana-restricted magic. But its old-school sensibilities can be a double-edged sword. The lack of direction can lead to genuine confusion, and the combat, while tactical, can feel stiff or basic in the early hours before your build comes together. Some quality-of-life features are intentionally missing to preserve friction, which might frustrate some players. Still, Pale Coins delivers a rare sense of discovery and danger, perfect for those who miss the era when fantasy games trusted you to get lost and find your own way out. Sleep Awake is one of the most unsettling indie releases this year. Not because it leans on cheap scares or loud horror tropes, but because it weaponizes ambiguity, repetition, and surreal imagery to create a dream-logic experience you can't shake off. The world feels like a half-remembered nightmare. Dim hallways that loop into new shapes, familiar rooms that subtly change each time you enter, and distorted figures who speak in riddles or whisper fragments of forgotten conversations. It uses a grainy visual style and soft focus textures that make everything look like footage recovered from a corrupted memory, which only deepens the unease. Gameplay revolves around navigating shifting environments where the rules keep changing. Doors disappear, lights flicker in patterns that hint at codes, and interactive objects react differently depending on your previous choices or your mental state, which the game quietly tracks. What stands out is how it blurs the line between exploration and psychological narrative. Every area feels symbolic. Every puzzle feels like a metaphor, and every moment of silence carries tension. It's a horror game that wants to disorient, not simply frighten. However, that same creative direction brings inevitable caveats. The game's dream logic can feel cryptic to the point of frustration. Some puzzles rely heavily on interpretation rather than clear feedback, leaving players unsure whether they're making progress or wandering in circles. The pacing is intentionally slow, which might alienate those expecting more action-driven horror. And while the narrative is rich in subtext, it reveals very little directly, meaning players seeking clean answers may feel unsatisfied by its abstract resolution. But for those who love atmospheric indie horror, the kind that aims for your subconscious instead of your adrenaline, Sleep Awake is a standout gem. It's artistic, eerie, and emotionally heavy in a way that lingers long after you close the game. It proves that horror doesn't need monsters chasing you to be terrifying. Sometimes, the most frightening thing is being left alone with your own mind. Morta is one of the bleakest, most artistically confident indie releases of 2025. A game that blends grim folklore, surreal horror, and narrative-driven exploration into something that feels more like a descent than an adventure. Its world is carved from sharp shadows and muted earth tones, with hand-painted environments that look like illustrations ripped from an old, forbidden storybook. Weathered stone, skeletal trees, and broken sanctuaries fill the landscape, each area feeling like it holds a secret you're not sure you want to uncover. It's beautiful in a way that feels wrong, which is exactly the point. At its core, it's about wandering through a land that no longer belongs to the living. You solve cryptic environmental puzzles, decipher strange rituals, and interact with characters who seem half aware of their own despair. Every line of dialogue has this heavy, symbolic weight, hinting at sins, bargains, and tragedies buried beneath generations of fear. The combat is minimalistic but punishing. Every encounter feels like a judgment, not a fight. Timing matters more than equipment, and even winning feels like you only delayed something inevitable. Of course, this kind of artistic ambition comes with drawbacks. The pacing is intentionally oppressive, which some players found overwhelming in extended sessions. Clues aren't always clear, leading to moments of wandering where you're unsure if you missed something or if the game wants you to feel lost. A few reviewers pointed out difficulty spikes that feel uneven, more like trials of patience than tests of skill. And because the narrative leans so heavily on symbolism, some players may finish the game feeling like they grasped the mood, but not the meaning. Still, Morta stands out because it doesn't compromise. It's a deeply atmospheric experience that rewards players willing to sink into its suffocating tone and interpret its story on their own terms. It's the kind of hidden gem that sparks discussion long after the credits roll. A somber reminder that indie games can still feel bold, poetic, and genuinely unsettling. Into Evil is a stylish, grim, fast-paced descent into darkness. The kind of indie that feels like someone distilled every cool moment from a dark fantasy anime and stitched them into a playable nightmare. It uses high-contrast visuals and sharp silhouettes to create a world that feels both ancient and aggressive. Think ritual altars lit by flickering crimson, monstrous silhouettes sliding through candle-lit ruins, and combat arenas shaped like sacrificial chambers. The visual direction alone tells a story of corruption and pressure, like something is always crawling just behind you. Gameplay-wise, it blends action RPG combat with roguelite structure, making every run feel tense and forcing improvisation. Enemies hit hard, dodge windows are tight, and the game expects you to master its rhythm rather than button mash your way out. Builds revolve around cursed relics, Bloodborne-style risk mechanics, and powerful abilities that always seem to come with a cost. It has that addictive loop where one more run turns into 10 more, because you're constantly chasing a deeper understanding of the game's brutal systems. But the roguelite foundation means it also inherits that genre's pain points. Difficulty can spike brutally depending on early game item RNG. Some relic combinations feel unbalanced, pushing players into repetitive strategies. The story, while atmospheric, is delivered in fragmented pieces that require effort to piece together, which may frustrate players looking for a more structured narrative. And like many early indie roguelikes, a few animations feel slightly stiff, especially during hectic encounters. Even with its rough edges, Into Evil succeeds because it leans fully into its aesthetic and mechanical identity. It's stylish, challenging, and drenched in mood, offering a level of atmosphere many bigger budget games struggle to achieve. If you enjoy dark fantasy worlds, skill-based combat, this is one of the strongest indie hidden gems of the year. Tavern Keeper is one of the most charming, personality-driven management sims to drop in 2025, and it has quickly become a quiet favorite among players who love creativity and controlled chaos. From the moment you take over your first shabby little tavern, the game pulls you into a warm, comedic world full of mischievous patrons, unpredictable events, and systems that feel both cozy and surprisingly deep. Unlike many management games that flatten their world into pure numbers, Tavern Keeper gives every character quirks and histories that ripple through your establishment. drunks who start brawls, adventurers bragging about quests, traveling merchants who leave gossip behind. The tavern itself becomes a stage full of personality. The art direction leans into stylized medieval whimsy, thick outlines, exaggerated animations, and colors that make every room feel alive. As your business grows, you expand kitchens, decorate dining halls, add bizarre entertainment options, and manage increasingly chaotic staff who might steal from you if they're unhappy or accidentally burn the place down if they're incompetent. Every system connects to another: reputation, cleanliness, food quality, customer mood, town politics, creating this layering effect where success feels earned, not automated. But it's definitely not without flaws. Some players notice the mid-game pacing slows down, with long stretches of waiting for resources or coin to accumulate. AI pathfinding can occasionally drive you insane, especially when customers clog hallways or employees prioritize baffling tasks. And while the game has plenty of charm, the narrative elements can feel thin for players expecting a story-rich experience. A few balancing issues still linger too, allowing certain strategies to dominate while others feel underbaked. Despite those rough edges, Tavern Keeper excels because it delivers a world that feels alive, not through cinematic cutscenes or heavy lore dumps, but through tiny interactions and emergent storytelling. It's the kind of game where you look back at your messy, overcrowded tavern and realize every disaster, every triumph, and every drunken brawl helped shape a story that was completely your own. For fans of creative management games and cozy chaos, this is easily one of 2025's best hidden gems. Fisher's Fishing Journey sounds like a simple fishing idle adventure at first glance, and it is. But it's also surprisingly stylish and unexpectedly addictive. The game uses 2D art with a soft color palette mixed with subtle lighting effects that make every lake, river, and coastal village feel handcrafted. Reflections shimmer gently on the water, reeds sway with almost meditative rhythm, and the game somehow captures the quiet loneliness of early morning fishing in a way that feels nostalgic even if you've never held a fishing rod in your life. The cool thing about this is you can set the game as a wallpaper and see the little cat guy fishing in the background. It's sort of a digital companion you have while you're on your PC, like the paperclip guy in Microsoft Word. You can collect fishes and showcase them in a fish tank. You'll sometimes have other characters come and talk to you, which is this game's way of delivering a narrative. But there's a lack of variety in side activities, and a few players wish for more mechanical depth in the late game. And while its story tidbits land well for what it is, they're not substantial, meaning players looking for something more tangible may not find it. Still, Fisher's Fishing Journey shines because it knows what it wants to be: a quiet, heartfelt experience wrapped in a peaceful vibe. It's an indie gem that innovates by slightly adding to a type of game that has been done 100 times before. Bloodgrounds looks like a city builder at first glance, but it's actually a deep, turn-based tactical strategy game with roguelite elements. It's less about button mashing and more about managing a gladiator school in a fantasy world that blends Roman and Greek mythology. You are a patron recruiting fighters, equipping them with gear that visibly changes their pixel art sprites and sending them into the arena to fight for glory and your revenge against the Emperor. Visually, it thrives on cozy but detailed pixel art, where every helmet and sword is rendered with care. The gameplay loop is addictive. You draft a team of warriors, mages, and rangers, then command them on a grid-based battlefield. Positioning is everything. You need to leverage class synergies, use audience-thrown items like bandages, and complete dynamic side objectives mid-match. The stakes are high because permadeath is always on. If your star gladiator dies, they and their expensive gear are gone forever. For all its strategic depth, the game can be unforgiving. The management layer requires you to balance gold and injuries carefully, and a bad run of RNG in the arena can wipe out hours of progress. It's a game that demands patience and planning, not twitch reflexes. But if you love the idea of building a legacy and sweating over every tactical decision in the sand, Bloodgrounds offers a satisfyingly bloody chess match that you won't want to put down.
Maybe coming back to this condition of yours.
Rue Valley is a quietly unnerving experience, a narrative-driven exploration game wrapped in the aesthetic of a vintage, dreamlike mystery. The world looks like it was painted using soft pastels and foggy ink, creating environments that feel both beautiful and unsettling. Streets bend at impossible angles. Homes sit abandoned with half-finished meals still on the tables. And the valley itself feels suspended in time, like the moment before a storm that never comes. It's the kind of game that doesn't need jump scares to be frightening. The atmosphere alone does the heavy lifting. Gameplay revolves around uncovering what happened to the valley's missing residents. You explore houses, dig through journals, interpret cryptic notes, and interact with strange relics that hint at supernatural forces lurking beneath the town's history. Every clue feels deliberately placed, and the pacing is calm but heavy. The game knows exactly how to let silence make you uneasy. There are light puzzle elements, environmental storytelling, and occasional moments where reality subtly distorts, making you question whether the valley is haunted, cursed, or simply broken by something unseen. But its biggest strength, its quiet subtlety, is also where some players run into frustration. The game rarely explains itself directly, which can lead to moments of wandering without clear objectives. A few puzzles rely more on intuition than logic, leading to trial and error frustration. Its slow pacing may feel too passive for gamers expecting action or clear progression checkpoints. And some critics noted that the ending, while thematically strong, leaves certain plot threads intentionally ambiguous. Even so, Rue Valley remains one of the most distinctive indie releases of the year. It's intimate, atmospheric, and rich with that unsettling beauty only smaller studios seem to pull off anymore. For players who enjoy narrative mysteries, psychological tension, and environments that tell their own stories, Rue Valley is easily one of 2025's most overlooked treasures. Routine is a minimalist sci-fi survival experience with an unexpectedly rich emotional core. Instead of relying on bombastic action or heavy exposition, it places you in a lonely, decaying colony where the rhythms of daily tasks are the only things standing between you and collapse. You manage oxygen levels, repair failing systems, and explore abandoned facilities while piecing together what happened through environmental storytelling. The world is painted in cool blues, harsh metallic grays, and quiet shadows. It's less about spectacle and more about mood. What makes Routine stand out is how it turns ordinary actions into narrative beats. Fixing a wiring panel becomes a moment of dread when you hear something move in the vents. Walking down a sterile hallway becomes tense when lights flicker out behind you. The game thrives on negative space, long stretches of quiet where your mind fills in what isn't shown. It's the kind of sci-fi that leans heavily on isolation, evoking classics like Moon and Alien, but filtered through a slow, indie sensibility. Of course, the deliberate pacing won't work for everyone. Some players found the long stretches of maintenance tasks too repetitive, especially when multiple systems break at once and require trekking back and forth across the base. A few mechanics feel underdeveloped, and the stealth elements can be clunky when danger finally appears. The story, while atmospheric, unfolds slowly and without traditional structure, which may leave some wishing for more explicit revelations. Still, Routine succeeds because it understands the power of restraint. It doesn't oversell its mysteries or force action where it doesn't belong. Instead, it creates a heavy, lingering sense of dread built from silence, routine, and the fear that something is watching just out of sight. It's an indie gem for players who value mood, tension, and slow-burn sci-fi storytelling.
Fall back under mud, dirty water.
The Drifter is one of 2025's sharpest indie thrillers, a grim, fast-moving story wrapped in gritty pixel art and drenched in paranoia. You play a drifter who witnesses a violent murder and gets pulled into a conspiracy that keeps twisting long after you think you understand what's happening. The tone is pure retro noir. Rain-slicked streets, grimy motels, flickering neon, and conversations that feel like everyone's hiding something. It's stylish without being pretentious, and the tension never lets up. What makes it stand out is how it blends grounded crime drama with sudden, unnerving supernatural shifts. Reality bends at the edges. Voices echo where they shouldn't, memories fracture, and the game uses these moments sparingly enough that everyone hits hard. Dialogue is sharp, pacing is tight, and the whole experience feels like a cult thriller you stumble upon late at night and can't turn off. Even the animations carry weight. Punches land brutally, chases feel desperate, and the protagonist's exhaustion becomes part of the atmosphere. It's not perfect. Some puzzle moments lean a bit too much on trial and error, and the linear structure means players looking for branching choices won't find them. A few transitions happen so fast they can feel disorienting, especially near the end. But those rough edges almost add to the game's scrappy charm. It's messy in the same way the world it portrays is messy. The Drifter ends up being one of the year's strongest hidden gems because it knows exactly what it wants to be. A tight, stylish, unsettling noir mystery with just enough strange energy to keep you guessing. If you like tense narratives, grim atmosphere, and stories that refuse to play safe, this is an indie you don't want to overlook.
It's nearly here. What is?